Happy Sunday. This is PFG Live, the podcast that's stuck in the middle with you. It's a busy day here in the Discord server. We're welcoming Warren Jones, Dale, Evils, Bill Olney, Ted Hyde, Josh, Kyle, Quentin, DBX, Tucker, AJF, Chris O, and Carl Tauber. Welcome aboard. It's a beautiful day. Let's get right down to it. Let's see. Evils is reporting some bunch of numbers that says it's a little cool in your establishment. 16.8 degrees Celsius and a whole bunch of other things. Rome, New York. Bill Olney says 55 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, 57% humidity, and 4.6 kilowatts coming in. I love it. Dale reports 6.0 degrees science, 91% relative humidity, and light rain in the Canada. Bud. Josh says in southern Manitoba, at Charlie X-Ray Mike Delta, the winds are 180 at 19, gusting 26, temperature 12, dew point 09. Remarks, there was some peak wind, and it was strong. Tucker says in chilly Buffalo, New York, it is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. You should store that up for Buffalo. Quentin says the weather report from Decoy, I'll pronounce that later, Naval Air Base, 30 miles north of where I live. He says Echo Hotel Kilo Delta is reporting winds are 270 at 24 knots, no significant weather, light drizzle, rain, few clouds at 2,800 feet in cumulonimbus. That's why there's rain. Scattered at 3,400, broken to 4,900, overcast at 6,400, temperature 10, dew point 03, altimeter 1, I can't do this, I think it's 11001. I can't remember. Warren Jones in Sutton, New Hampshire, my neighbor to the north, says it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit, overcast and calm winds. We have 52 degrees Fahrenheit here in the Windham, New Hampshire, 50% perfect relative humidity. Evils, Evils doesn't get heat until November. Hang in there, buddy. Get a blankie. Let's see. Art that makes art. Art that makes art. Where are you? There you are. He says it's windy, rainy, and 40 degrees today. Perfect day to be in the shop.
Shut up, Wesley.
CJ Stevens says 64 and threatening to rain in East Tennessee. Welcome aboard, sir. And Carl Tauber says it's sunny and 55 degrees in the People's Republic. Did you just give me a weather report on two different channels? I believe you did. You snuck that right in. Welcome, guys. Ted Hyde says from Casa Frog Pro Resources in Eustis, Florida, says Kilo Lima Echo Echo says it's 070 at 9 knots, gusting 19 knots, 10-mile visibility, scattered 2,800, broken 3,400, overcast 6,000. Temperature 28, that's a little warm. Dew point 21, altimeter 3005. Remarks, he gave us a remark in C. Include realgoodapp.h. Thank you. That's good. That was excellent. Bootstrap Garage is reporting 8 degrees Celsius and 49% relative humidity in Waterloo, Ontario. Thank you. Welcome aboard, sir. Say you can wave at Waterloo University. That is cool. We're all here. We're all here. Welcome. What a nice Sunday. Oh my gosh. Local airport is Manchester Airport, reporting 310 at 12 knots, 10-mile visibility, scattered at 4,500, temperature 12, dew point -01, altimeter 3034, and there are many remarks we don't care about. DBX is now reporting from near White Plains. Actually, he's reporting White Plains. Winds are 300 at 7 knots, visibility 10 miles, clear, 14 degrees, and 02 on the dew point, altimeter 3038. So in case you're just joining us, the altimeter in the United States is reported in inches of mercury. So that's 30.38 inches of mercury. However, in our friends' reports from the EU, I'm looking for, where is he? There he is. Quentin says the altimeter comes in as Q1001, and that is in, I can't remember the units. See how much I fly in Europe? Hectopascals, right? There you go. It's close. It only matters because you're going to set your instrument on the panel. So as long as your instrument on the panel is doing the same thing as the report you got coming in, you're all set. So good morning. Hi, how are you? Needed to take the day off last week. Thank you for indulging me that time. We had family stuff going on because there was a birthday in the family, and it was mine. Made it through another one. And there was cheesecake. Oh, to be honest, I had the last piece of cheesecake this morning for breakfast, and it was spectacular. So, yeah, I did make it around the sun one more time. And you know that turn on the left 3/4 there? I'm going to get that better next time. You just watch. Yeah. I'm not a party person. Okay. So we didn't have any huge deal, and I don't require anything for my birthday except sushi and cheesecake. And so far, so good. We did okay. CJ Stevens says, breakfast cake is the best. Yes, it is. And it was pretty yummy this morning. And I was happy for it. So we really have 2 weeks to catch up on. And there's fish flavored cheesecake. I don't think so, Evils. I don't think we're going there. You can go out, wander off to the kitchen where you'll probably flounder. Flounder. Okay, thanks. So we have 2 weeks to catch up on, and in those 2 weeks, I found myself thinking more and more about these topics that we're going to talk about today. In particular, the programming of automated systems, and was like, what does that even mean? Because I don't want to talk about computers anymore, but we're going to talk about more than computers because we're all doing it. We're all doing exactly programming automated systems, and we're doing it in the shop, or we're doing it not in the shop, and we should talk about it. So we will. Let's see. First, we need to give you guys the report from the Flat Cave.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
So all the orders that could be shipped out were shipped out. We have a couple of orders still in the works. You know who you are. Carbide rounds are going out tomorrow morning. 8-inch flats are going out tomorrow. I love can I just say for a second, I love making the 8-inch stones. It's like you're finally getting to use all of your grinder. These things are so long. And that was a lot of fun. So 8 inches are going out. Tomorrow we have our second run-in with DHL. I'm very excited about it. To Canada. I know we talked about what happened last time. It's going to happen again. And I just got some requests from Hong Kong, and they all preemptively told me they liked DHL. So the DHL thing is going to keep going. What else have we got going in the shop? That's it gets you caught up. So we're pretty much up to date. One very cool update. I think it's cool. And the reason I'm wearing the red shirt today, by the way, on Star Trek, wearing the red shirt is not such a good idea, but here, wearing the red shirt is a very good idea. I've made some red balancing stands, and they look chef's kiss, magnificent. So if you are unfamiliar, I make and sell the model number BS8, and no, there's no hidden message there, balancing stands, and they are available in green and red. Now the green is called pine green, and the red is called vermilion red from Bamboo. And they discontinued the pine green, I think. I have to go review this, but basically those two colors may go away, one or the other or both, because they changed their color schemes when they reintroduced Tough Plus filament as opposed to just the Tough. So I am making these when they're gone. The color may change a little bit, but the green ones, I don't know if I can keep going in that green. That green was a really nice green, so we'll see. But that's going into inventory, and we're actually I'm going to rearrange things on the website. We'll probably run a little sale to celebrate it, and those will be available. So those will help you get balanced and have a balanced diet, as we have proven to do here. That's pretty much the news from the shop. I've been working on lapping infrastructure because we're fixing to get ready to finish up the customer lapping job that needed the big laps. And I've got some cool ideas that are going to involve building 3D holding fixtures for this odd-shaped thing. So that's the very next thing that's coming up. And there's some antenna stuff going on, but that's not in the Kinetic Precision wheelhouse. So we'll talk about that another day. So that's what's cooking in the shop. Let's see, community notes. I think does anybody have any community notes that you hadn't given me this past week? Oh, I have a community note. One of our guys was looking for somebody who has CNC converted a lathe. So I'll read his message, and I suggested that he goes and posts in the Do-It-Yourself Machines channel. So we do have a Do-It-Yourself Machines channel, and it's about people building their own machines. We made it a forum instead of a chat channel in Discord as an experiment. So hopefully he'll post in there, and he'll post some details as to what he's looking for. But it's Kenicky in our Discord. Says, "Hi Spencer, do you know of anyone in the community that has converted a manual lathe to CNC? I'm wanting to convert a Jet 13x40, which by the way is what I started with. That was my first big lathe. Hoping to find a documented build or a good contact." So if anybody meets those requirements, let me know. I'll connect you guys, or just come onto Discord and look up Kenicky, and maybe you guys can compare notes. So at my makerspace is my old lathe, my old Jet 13x40 is sitting at the makerspace. Josh says Clow 42 would be a good start with his electronic lead screw. That's a good idea. I like that. And that's where my knowledge of this subject ends, because I am not an expert. And, some of us are.
I am not an expert.
But not me. Any other community notes? I'm just looking at who's here. If you do have any, drop them in the chat, and we'll share them with the rest of the world. So I have questions for you guys. What was the first thing you ever programmed? You ever wrote a program for, and you made it do a repetitive task? What was the first thing you ever programmed? Josh, yeah, I know. Okay. So Josh says, and this is correct, by the way, he says, "Hello world." Right. So traditionally in the programming world, if you walk up to a new computer, new language, whatever, you would write a little thing that prints "Hello world." That was always the icebreaker, right? And yeah, what was your Hello world, and what hardware was it on? Tim Beatty says a Zenith Z100 from Heathkit. That's awesome. I remember that. Let's see. Evils says, do WoW macros count World of Warcraft? The answer is yes. If that was your first macro or your first programming. So a WoW macro. I did not see that coming, Evils. Carl Tauber says a Wang programmable calculator in the 70s. Extra credit for remembering the model number, Carl. And CJ Stevens says he's not sure, but it was in Turbo Pascal. That's awesome. You guys are getting ahead of me. Josh says Pong was the first thing I programmed. That's cool. Do you remember it was probably in BASIC, right? What was it running on? Dale says he's old enough that he can't remember exactly. Maybe it was you. Maybe it was your brain, Dale. Ted Hyde says a Z80 prior to Motorola and Microchip. Quentin posts a great picture of a Philips P2000. By the way, in my basement, I have a Hewlett-Packard HP85 in very nice condition. Quentin says it might have been a Commodore VIC-20. We had both when we were growing up. Josh says C++, which is the language that he programmed Pong in, and it was a class in school. Neato. And Carl correctly points out, those brain cells have been poached in alcohol. Well, maybe you could remember it later after it evaporates. Dale says, I'm pretty sure it was one of those cassette tape video game consoles you got the book and the console from the library? ? So you guys can keep going. I'll catch up with you. But the point is that we all remember our first. And I remember my first. Ted and I are closer. He says, is the HP85 running your antenna simulation via HPIB? All right, Ted, that was right on target. No. However, I wrote, this is actually pretty funny. CJ Stevens says, my grandfather brought home magazines with code for the C64. I sold a C64. That was my father-in-law's. And Quentin says, I recorded games for the VIC-20 from the radio. Whoa. That is pretty amazing. All right. So many stories here. Many stories. When I was in junior high school, the math teacher dragged me into this storeroom in our school. And there were all these machines up on the shelves. I remember there were two specific kinds of machines. One was a very mechanical calculator that was somehow programmable or something. I don't remember the name, nothing. It was just chunky. But the other one was a calculator, a desktop calculator with a spinning hammer printer. Some of you know what I'm talking about, where all the letters are on the drum and then hammers would hit as the letters went by. It had a display that was probably an electroluminescent display. It had a calculator-type keyboard. And as an accessory, it had a card reader. And a further accessory was a little holder that you would take the cardboard card and you put it in there, and you would pop out different little chads. Now we know what chads are. From the thing to program it, and then you would feed that into the card reader, and you could load a program into this programmable calculator, which I would now still call a computer. And I think it was it might have been the first program I wrote on my own, and I wrote a program to generate prime numbers. And I can't remember if that was the very first one or had it, because there's a couple of things that happened in that time period. But that started my prime number calculating, was my hello world. So I would generate prime numbers. And this thing sat on the table in my sister's room. My sister's away at college. She's 4 years older than me. Yeah, so she must have been in her freshman year at college. Her room was now, available. So this thing sat in her room, and I would program it. And every time this calculator found a prime number, it would print it on the paper tape. And if I ever find this paper tape in a box somewhere, I will show you guys. So you'd hear it go brrrp, 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 and they would get slower and slower and slower until it was at the point where it was like 48 hours before you'd hear the thing go. And I kind of remember that it got up into sort of the million area, and then it was just too long. We couldn't last any longer. But that was the first thing. So from that point on, if I got a new thing, I would program it to generate prime numbers. That was my hello world. Later, I got this is sort of out of order. I got a HP-25 calculator, which was programmable. And I would do the same thing. I wrote a program for that. HP-41C calculator. I wrote the same program for that. And this went on for quite a while. Fast forward to Python, and I start reading my Python book and learning Python. So I'm sitting there and I realize you could run Python code on your iPhone. So I loaded the app and I started writing the same code and, hit the button, generate prime numbers. And it was just like an amazing amount of prime numbers. And of course I repeated that on the Windows computer, etc. So let's see, are there any other, I also had, for you guys that are talking about the old computers, I had a, CPM machine. I don't remember the make, but I had a CPM machine that I programmed in. And then I helped out at the high school that my mom was a teacher at. They had another CPM machine, 8080, right? Let's see. DBX says games on the Radio Shack TRS-80 in BASIC. Next was a plotter routine on a VAX PDP 11780. And then MIDI programming in Pascal on a Mac. And then 30 years of various stuff. Yeah. My high school had a PDP 8. And it was in this back of this big classroom in the math department. And it was behind a gate that was locked. And then there was a terminal inside and a card reader outside. So if you wanted to run a job on the PDP-8, you could submit punch cards, but you were not allowed inside the gate unless you were a system operator and trained. And I was able to do that because I took the training. And it goes on. The Wang computer in my high school, a Wang 2200 VS, which it was basically mine while I was there. So time passes, and here we are. We're living in a world of technology. I mean, in our thumbnail today is a picture of a featherboard inside of the new hygrometer that we've been developing. And that featherboard has more power in it than any of the computers we just mentioned, except maybe for, some of the later big ones. But, the first, of all the early computers, this was like a mainframe of its day. So the featherboard, which comes from Adafruit, has the ESP32 processor. It has Wi-Fi built in, Bluetooth built in. The reason we use it for the hygrometer additionally is that it also does all the battery management. It knows about lithium polymer batteries. It has all the safety for chargings. Tim says we only use the cards for Fortran programs. So you just reminded me of another story. When I was in junior high school, the high school near me was running an after-school program to learn how to program in Fortran. And I took this course, and starting to learn how to run the punch card puncher and how to feed the deck into the reader. And it was this huge, terminal, which was an IBM thing with a dot matrix printer and a card reader, and it would send your programs into the Board of Ed's IBM 360. And I was learning how to write Fortran code, and it was cool. So I get to talking to my Uncle Irv. Now, my Uncle Irv owned a software company, very successful software company. He's now retired. And I'm telling him about this, and I'm like, he says, do you know how to read those JCL cards in the front of the deck? And I'm like, no, they just told us what to put in front of the deck. There was like 3 or 4 cards that you put in front of your program, and that's it. You do what they told you to do. So then he starts teaching me about job control language, JCL, on the IBM 360. And I just want to say I got a really good grade in that course. In fact, all of my grades were excellent. Yeah, that's the last time I think they ever ran that course with the computer that was at the Board of Ed. But I digress. That was a lot of fun. But here we are, 2025. You could for $13. I can't even remember how much the Adafruit Featherboard costs that we were using. You have a ridiculously powerful computer. You could make it run Python, Circuit Python, they call it, natively, and off you go. And we chose that because it did all the things, and it's now running on batteries, just like you see in the picture. And we have 6 copies of it downstairs right now. And it has automated our filament drying process inside the AMSs. And we talked about that previously on a previous episode. So Evil says that there's some version. Oh, you mean there's the processor? The bare chip costs less than €1. It's crazy. Anyway, if you look on the bottom of this graphic here, this is Home Assistant running on a Raspberry Pi. Another story is the Raspberry Pis. And on the bottom, you could see the system turning on and off, the flow turning on and off as our various AMSs are dry enough or not dry enough. And this has now been running for a couple of weeks. I found an error in the programming in the Home Assistant, in my programming. I fixed that, and it's been running perfectly. So we've been very happy with it, and it's keeping our filaments generally below 15% relative humidity, which I've determined was acceptable. And if you look on the screen, you'll see one of them is at 16%, which is why the system is still on right now. And when that guy drops below 15%, and the other guy up here that's at 15.1 is at 15, it'll fall below 14%, and then it'll turn off again. So that's why it's cycling, and it's doing it exactly correctly. So that's another example of a programmed system that we have been enjoying. So it contains Home Assistant running on a Raspberry Pi, our hygrometers running on the ESP32S3 Featherboard, and then, of course, the human who sits up at night making sure it's working on an iPhone. We have learned how to program these things. So last Thursday, I wanted to do some programming, but I wasn't sure if it was exactly the right way to do it. It had to do with timing. It had to do with effectiveness. So I did the only logical thing. I called an expert and I said, how should I program the system? And the expert says, now's a good time to program the system. this is what you should do. This is the approach. So I went to the place where I had to go to program the system, and I sought an expert programmer, and they said, well, before we run this program, we're not sure if you have the right processor, because your processor may be different. And this expert went ahead and checked my processor and finally came to the conclusion that, no, this is good. This is going to be fine. It's going to run great. And he proceeded to help me initiate this program. And then I went home and reported back to my wife that the program's running. And then Friday, I was feeling like crap because I initiated the vaccination program called flu and the vaccination program called COVID. And I did my 24 hours of pain. Not pain, but I was kind of miserable. And then I woke up on Saturday morning and I was fine. Did I program an automated system? Answer, yes. Did I write the code? No. Did I consult an expert about which code to run? Yes. Did I consult another expert about, am I doing this right? He was worried. This was the pharmacist. He was worried because I had an allergy indicated, and he wanted to triple check, double check, triple check. In particular, this was the flu vaccine. And he triple checked against my allergy, and he says, no, you're good to go. This is fine. While he was triple checking that, and I saw him using ChatGPT, by the way. While he was triple checking that, I get on the doobly-doo, and I send a text message to Chandra, and I said, the pharmacist is worried about this. She's doing simultaneous checking, comes back, says, no, it's going to be fine. Okay, everything's fine. And boom, he starts the two programs on Thursday. And if you didn't hear from me at all on Friday in my usual chatty fashion, that is why. I'm feeling great. So literally woke up Saturday morning and it was like it never happened. But that was programming an automated system. And some really smart people wrote the program, which was the makeup of the vaccine, to do a thing, to teach my software a new skill. And it works. So, that's programming an automated system. I have a spreadsheet that runs my whole business. So all the PFG Stones runs off a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet pops up these numbers, and it controls a human. The spreadsheet controls a human. And it says, yeah, go downstairs and print 2 trays and 1 lid for the 6-inch stones. And I'm like, yes, program. And I go downstairs and I do it. Who's programming who? I wrote the code in the spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet is now controlling the human. Does it work? It works great, especially when you're tired. Because you just look at what the spreadsheet's telling you and you do that, everything will be fine. Wake up on Monday morning, the spreadsheet says, go to Airgas and buy these stones, these Norton stones. I'm like, thank you, spreadsheet. And you just go do it. Yeah, Josh correctly says, this sounds a lot like owning a cat. You don't train them, they train you. Yeah, that's exactly right. Is that an automated system? Yes, it is. So let's see. We talked about a few of them. So another automated system, of course, is CNC. You want to go run a CNC machine, what do? You sit down typically in Fusion and you generate your model and you run Fusion CAM, right? And it will turn your model into tool paths, and you tweak those until you like them, and then you hit the button and it will generate G-code. Well, what is G-code? G-code is the language that now your machine understands, and it will execute your G-code. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen the processor, the machine code that the processor's getting? No, because there's another level of abstraction from G-code down to ones and zeros going in and out of that processor. So you have these multiple levels of abstraction now, all the way up to you staring at your screen and hoping that Protium can make your parts. Welcome aboard, sir. Protium says if you haven't played with the dump file out of Fusion, it's definitely interesting. Well, you just gave me a new thing to look for. So we've been, we talked about Home Assistant. Home Assistant has no, well, that's not true. You could operate Home Assistant without any programming language per se. But if you're an advanced user, you can actually go in and write in, they call it YAML, Y-A-M-L. I've only poked at it, not an expert.
I am not an expert.
And then you could be running Home Assistant doing really funky stuff. Anybody ever, I know we have a couple of cooks here. You follow a recipe card, right? So you're running a program. And some of you actually stick to the recipe, which is pretty good. So here's a question for you. If you're machining parts from a drawing on a manual machine, was there any programming of an automated system? Protium says, recipes are suggestions. Baking recipes are rules. I completely agree with that. That's why I don't do any baking. So if you're manually machining parts, is that an automated system? And is there a program? I love watching Adam Booth. I've been watching Adam since the very beginning, and he's a great manual machinist. But if you give him a job to make 10 of these things and he elects to go do it on his manual machines, which happens a lot, you will find that he has an order of operations and he has a certain way of doing things. And he repeats that, and he repeats that, and he repeats that. And that's programming. So there's nothing mystical about programming per se, because you're programming yourself. Josh says if you made gingerbread cookies, you could probably grind them to be PFG Stones. Yeah, but they'd be too delicious and I wouldn't ship them. Evil says if the manual operator follows the script. Yeah, but if you're the manual operator and you are writing the script, my point is I don't think you go to Adam Booth and you hand him a part to make for your motorcycle and you say you need 10 of them. And you're pretty much going to get 10 that are made the same way after the program gets written, right? So I think that we should get comfortable with the whole idea of programming an automated system. You're an automated system. When you wake up in the morning, I bet you have a particular order of things you do that leads you to your first cup of caffeine. I know I do. So yeah, I'm reading your comments. Even one will have an order of operations. We only use the cards for Fortran programs. Yeah. Protium says the biggest thing with automated systems is documentation. Have you been documenting your Home Assistant build? That's a super good question. Home Assistant is sort of self-documenting. In other words, I could open up my automations in Home Assistant and you can see them. Have I taken pen to paper or opened up a notes file and made notes about it? No, not with Home Assistant. I haven't, but I sure did find my error that I was making, and I had to fix it. So that doesn't involve code in a file. I will say that the code that is running on the hygrometer, as seen right there, that is well commented. And when I do find something that is an improvement, it goes into comments. That is an important thing. And also, let's see if I have this binder here. Yeah. So when I do my lapping, right, this is my lapping recipe book. These are my programs for lapping. So I defined a language, a lapping language. Okay, you can see my little form here. And I will write a program for my manual execution. And then I will execute that program, and then I will evaluate the results. And sometimes, this is going to come as no surprise, sometimes you will find something you don't like that particular routine is underworking the edges for some reason. And you'll say, and you'll make an adjustment. But you make the adjustment on the piece of paper with a pen, and you update your recipe, and then you rerun the recipe. And I have gotten extremely good results in lapping by establishing and sticking to a recipe. So, sorry, Flat Lapper, did I offend you by manual lapping? Tim Beatty says, didn't Clow 42 CNC his grinding machine? Yes, he did. And I will tell you that PFG Stones would not exist right now if it weren't for a CNC grinding machine. So says my left shoulder. Yeah, he did. And one area that I am not familiar with is industrial controllers. Industrial controllers are another tool that I have not programmed, and it would be very interesting to one day get a chance to look at them and see how they work. Josh says, Josh got an error message that says, system runs poorly until coffee.exe has run. You are correct. So I identified what the processes of programming are, kind of the steps we go through. And this would apply whether you're talking about programming a computer, right? Or programming a CNC machine, or programming yourself, or programming a manual machining operation. Okay. The first step is to establish the goals. Okay. You have to know what you're trying to achieve. With manual machining, you've got specifications you're trying to hit. You got dimensions you're trying to hit. You have to know what the target is. I know that sounds trivial, but it's not trivial, because sometimes it's ill-defined, and that can cause running around in circles, which is a very inefficient sort of thing. So you have to establish what your goals are, and you have to, I'm going to use the words write it down, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be using ink. A second step is choose the platform. What platform are you going to use? Referring back to A-Bomb, I watched his video the other night. He says, here's a project I got from a buddy. It's a one-off. I'm going to use the manual machine. Okay, so he chose the platform. The second Heyman project that he got in the last couple of weeks, he said, I'm going to use the CNC machine. No problem. Two completely different approaches. Okay, but he established the goals, right? That was the client requirements. And he chose the platform. The next one is understanding the commands. So in a manual machine, you have to learn the machine, and you have to know which knob does what, how much is good, which tools are right, and you have to understand what commands are available to you on this automation platform. On the CNC machine, it's equally important to understand what the commands are. I believe you have to understand what the G codes are enough to do a little bit of straight G code programming. But when your CAM software spits stuff out and you're satisfied with it, you have to know how to go from those toolpaths to basic commands that are going to go into the G code and go into the machine. And then as you write your program, which might be just modifying your CAM, you have to understand what it's going to do. For example, I've gotten into trouble a few times because the CAM software wanted the G code to do a thing using a radius command, the I's and J's and K's, and then the machine alarms and it says, "Yeah, no, can't do that." It's like, okay, if you're gonna figure out the difference, why it did that, you have to know something about the commands that are flying back and forth. So step number 3, understand the commands. Step number 4, code it with help. Now here's what gets interesting. When I was working on the hygrometer and we're coding in CircuitPython, that's the version of Python that Adafruit created for their featherboards. It's called CircuitPython. It's pretty much standard Python. I had to code it. Well, when I started the hygrometer project, which actually 2 years ago, if you want to get, specific, when I built the little featherboard workstation, Josh says, flashes back to writing G code in college. Radius errors were the bane of my existence. Okay, you understand what I'm talking about. And then once you get it, right? So when I started writing the code that read the hygrometer information and transmitted the hygrometer information to a server, at the time that server was there was actually a couple of flavors, but for a while I used Adafruit IO, which I would now describe, because I now know the language, as an MQTT server. Actually, it's called an MQTT broker, but it's a broker and a server, and it makes charts and graphs and handles your data and will do automations. But when I did that, I had to cut and paste code from Adafruit's documentation to make things work, which I did, and I got it working, and it was fun. Never closed the loop, never made an automation out of it. It was just a monitoring system, but it worked. And then time passes, and then one day I woke up and said, we're not going to use Adafruit IO anymore. We're going to bring it in-house. So now I had to figure out how to get my own MQTT broker and server running, and that's what led me to Home Assistant. Home Assistant does that stuff. And once I did that, now I start upgrading and modifying the code in the hygrometer. Here's the funny thing. Between the time I started the project and was all proud of my little feather workstation and started writing little bits of code for that, to the time when we started building this black box, a little thing changed in the world of programming. Anybody know what that little thing was called? Anybody want to take a guess? Somewhere in the middle of those 2 years, what happened that completely changed programming? Anybody? Bueller?
Now you know the rest of the story.
Correct, Josh. Josh is not only correct, he said it perfectly. ChatGPT is Tim, yeah, but Josh says large language models. That's a very specific description of the flavor of AI used by ChatGPT. So Tim said ChatGPT, Josh said large language models. Exactly correct. And I went to ChatGPT and I said, I was blown away by this, by the way. At this point, we're up to ChatGPT 5. Yeah, Dale calls it almost intelligence. And I literally said, I'm writing code to do this, do that, do this, and here's my code. And I cut and pasted the code right into the chat, and I hit go. And I was pretty blown away with how detailed and nuanced it was finding stuff in my code. It was a good instructor to me as the programmer, okay? It was a great instructor. I don't think ChatGPT has more training on anything greater than the training it has on writing code. Yeah, we're getting to that. Proteum says it's like talking with an intelligent liar who won't admit they don't know. You never know if you're getting instruction or BS. Correct. Now, at the end of the voluminous output I got from ChatGPT, it always said something like, would you like me to rewrite your code with the above suggestions? In other words, it would give me, here's something you should look at. Here's something you should look at, with a code snippet. Here's something you should look at with a code snippet. And it says, if you want, I'll just edit your code for you. I have your original file. I have my suggestions. Would you like me to completely rewrite your code? And my answer, you guys are typing furiously. My answer is always no. I will take your snippet, I will understand what you're trying to do, and I will update my code. I never let it rewrite, the whole batch of code. And in this manner, I was being forced to understand what was going on, and I was learning to be a better programmer. I mean, I've never gotten a lot of formal training in this kind of programming. Yeah. So that was a super good tool, and it really did lead us down the road to very good code in the hygrometer. It's working really well. Are there things that ChatGPT suggested I do that I didn't do? Yes. For example, when when the hygrometer wants to shoot a measurement into Home Assistant as part of my system, I wasn't convinced I was always getting through. Like I would see delays in Home Assistant that were like an hour long, but I was sending in data every 20 minutes. So it said, oh, you should turn on your QoS, quality of service. There's a little, don't worry about the details, but in the command lines that were shooting the data to the MQTT broker, you could turn on quality of service. This was kind of like going from a UDP packet to a TCP packet. In other words, it would throw the data, QoS 0 was it would throw the packet in and that was it. QoS equals 1 was it would throw the packet in and it won't go away until the Home Assistant broker acknowledges receipt. And I said, in some cases, I want that. In other cases, I don't want that. So I implemented it. It doesn't appear to have any harm. It appears to be working great. I'll probably be keeping it in that limited fashion. But some more testing is needed. That's a good example of a suggestion that it made that I implemented cautiously and not completely. Proteum says, it will completely make up examples, though, so you have to be careful. Just because it shows its work doesn't mean it works. 100% agree. This is why I don't want it writing code that I'm going to just drop in. If you want to teach me something with a code snippet, I'm going to understand the code snippet and then implement it. And now everybody's happy. Yeah. Yeah. So Ted is basically saying that his company is helping correct his client's code, and he is observing code that was clearly written by an LLM. And I am really concerned about this whole concept of so-called vibe coding. I think that every programmer needs to understand the whys and wherefores of what they're doing. Now, as abstraction levels get higher, like going from G code to CAM, okay, that's fine, but it has to be done carefully. And we are moving up. Our abstraction levels are going, higher and higher. So step 4 was code it with help. And the help, of course, in my case, I was talking about the LLMs. Step number 5, test it and then iterate. So you test the code and you give it a bunch of conditions, you poke it with a stick, you make sure it works, and if you have to go back and go back around the loop a few times, you do that. Does this sound like we're writing a program? Yes, it does. And then finally, you deploy it. You get the programming figured out and you put it into the field. So right now, our Home Assistant hygrometer loop, is deployed, and we're actually running it, and we're watching it, and we're seeing it work, and it's been very, very successful. I am not missing becoming the desiccant monitor. Now, ironically, just going back to the hygrometer, we get, as I stated previously, we get 20% out of a compressor that is not heavily loaded. We explained why. 20% relative humidity. We go through our chiller, we get 7% relative humidity, and that works great. However, if you have a 15% relative humidity you're trying to move down, so you're cycling 7% air through it, it will move at a certain rate. But if you have put 1% air through it, it will move at a faster rate. So I have ordered a desiccant cartridge, a master desiccant cartridge, as part of the low flow system that isn't going to be overloaded, okay? That's going to get us from 7% down to something lower that will make the loop response faster. And that'll be the next experiment. So the next thing is a hardware experiment incoming. Software is working pretty darn good. Also, shout out to Jared, my son, who is building this run of 10 of our hygrometers and is learning a lot about production, soldering, documentation. It's going really well. He's learning. We're getting hygrometers, and soon they'll be everywhere. So that's it. I think the important thing is when you get help coding, make sure it's trustworthy help. And Proteum says the worst part of it is that they meaning the LLMs, they've already consumed and trained on all human data. So now it's just going to be eating its own tail and becoming worse and worse. Well, that's why it's incumbent upon us to use it as a tool, not as the final arbiter of our final work. And I think that's important. Okay, that's all I got on that. You guys are awesome, and continue programming your automated systems. Yeah, and I know that Evil says there are tricks for it to improve its output. I have heard of the folks that are professionally using it in programming, using 5 different agents 5 different instances at the same time, some to write some code, some to test some code, some to improve some code, and going around the loop that way. And eventually it will be better than us. It will. I mean, we're using CNC machines instead of manually programming or manually machining because it makes better work than we can do at a faster pace than we can do. That will continue in the whole world of programming. So, I know we make chips, we make stuff, we make things you could hold in your hand, and the whole issue of programming is sort of, some people would think it's a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but it's, it's not your bailiwick. It's not your main thing. It's not my main thing, but we have to understand how to apply it. So if there's any questions, comments, or on any topic, throw it into the chat, because otherwise we're going to wrap it up. We came to the top of the hour. There were no casualties. Nobody's been incarcerated, and I think that is a success.
We're not satisfied until you're not satisfied.
So with that, let me tell you something. That was not coordinated. Nicely done. Okay, so Proteum asks, is there a reason you haven't added the Bamboo integration into Home Assistant? No, there is no reason. I know it exists. I saw it literally in the last couple of weeks. I saw something go by that the Bamboos and Home Assistant, that the Bamboos can talk MQTT, which means it could talk to Home Assistant. But I am totally open to learning about that. I have not touched it yet because I have stuff I have to get done, but I'm open to hearing about that. Tim says, move to Arizona. I'm at less than 5% with nothing. It's being used to design computer chips. Yes, it is. In fact, there's so much fine detail in computer chips right now that I don't think any human actually gets to see all of the chip. And it could be a GPU, CPU. I have a friend of mine whose work is now in a 1 trillion transistor chip. Let me say that again. I have a friend whose handiwork is inside of a 1 trillion transistor chip. Trillion with a T. It's crazy out there. Yeah, Proteum. Proteum says it seems like a nice way to monitor the whole system. I may start playing with it, but right now I wanted to close this loop, and it's starting to close, and it's looking good. So I'm pretty happy. Well, with that, let me suggest that if you need something flat, head on over to PFGstones.com. You will also find the balancing stands, which are the BS8s. You will find the balancing rings, the B200s, and I am working on a video all about balancing. I can't promise when it'll drop, but it will tell the whole story, all the algorithms, everything you need to know to program yourself for balancing a wheel. PFG Stones are in stock largely, so if you place an order, the shipping is lightning fast, and our shipping department is just full of wonderful people. Okay. Evils is typing, and then we're going to sign out. If anybody has any questions, or you want to give me some community input for next week's event, please send them along. In the meantime, get flat, stay flat, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care.